It started like any other neighborhood gathering. People filled someone's backyard, plastic cups in hand, filled with cheap wine, all pretending to be closer than they actually were. There was the usual unspoken competition about who had their life more together. At first, I didn't think much of it when the conversation turned to my husband, Mark. I didn't think anything of it, either. Mark's always been a bit socially awkward. The kind of guy who trips over his words or tells a joke no one understands until it's too late. Sure, I've rolled my eyes at him plenty of times, but it didn't seem like a big deal. That night, though, something changed. Fueled by a few too many glasses of Chardonnay and the easy encouragement of the group, I found myself joining in. One of the women laughed and said, "We love Mark, but he's, well, a little different." At first, I didn't think much of it, but before I knew it, the word slipped out. "Oh, you have no idea," I said, unable to stop myself. "You should see him try to fix things around the house. It's like watching a YouTube tutorial in reverse. Everything just ends up worse." People laughed, really laughed. Not the polite, "Oh, that's funny" kind of laugh, but the deep, genuine kind that makes you feel like the funniest person in the room. And with that, I was hooked. I kept going, enjoying the rush of being the center of attention. "I swear," I continued, "sometimes I think Mark secretly tried auditioning for America's Funniest Home Videos." The group was all in now, completely engaged. I pressed on, like the time he tried to fix the garbage disposal and ended up flooding the kitchen. Classic Mark. By then, everyone was in on it. The men slapped their knees, and the women nodded knowingly. I glanced over at Mark across the patio. He was standing by the grill, flipping burgers, his face a careful mask of indifference. That should have been my clue to stop, but the laughter felt too good. So I pushed on. "And don't even get me started on his sense of direction," I said, grinning. "Mark could get lost in his own driveway. He's got this app now that's supposed to help, but half the time, he argues with it like, 'No, I know a better way.' Spoiler alert, he doesn't." Another round of laughter rippled through the group, and even Karen, the woman who'd always looked down on me since we moved in, was wiping away tears of laughter. For the first time, I felt like I was winning. But then, something changed. Mark put down the spatula. At first, I thought he was just stepping away to grab something. But then he walked toward us, his shoulders stiff and his jaw tight. The laughter died instantly. The group fell silent. Mark didn't stop until he was standing right in front of me. His voice was calm, measured, but there was an edge to it I'd never heard before. "Funny stuff, huh?" he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "You know what's really funny? Spending 15 years trying to make someone happy, only to find out you're the punchline at a backyard barbecue." The silence that followed was deafening. I tried to laugh it off, that I tried brushing it aside like it was just a joke. "Oh, come on, Mark. We're just joking around," I said, but his eyes didn't soften. He didn't laugh. "Well, here's a joke for you, Claire," he said, his words sharp. "It's over for good. You can tell your little audience here how funny that is." It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. My face burned. My mouth went dry, and I could barely get any words out. What?" I stammered, my heart racing. But he didn't wait for me to answer. He turned on his heel, grabbed his jacket, and walked out the side gate without a single glance back. The party ended faster than you could say awkward silence. People mumbled excuses, avoided eye contact, and scattered like cockroaches when the lights come on. By the time I'd half-heartedly cleaned up the mess, my phone was buzzing with texts. Most of them were variations of "Are you okay?" or "Wow." That was intense, but there was nothing from Mark. That's when it hit me. He wasn't coming back. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at my hands, replaying the whole night in my mind. The laughs, the jokes, the look on his face when he said those words. I hadn't realized how deep the knife had gone until it was too late. He had finally had enough, and now I had no idea what to do next. I woke up the next morning on the couch, my neck stiff, my head pounding, though I hadn't had enough wine to blame it on a hangover. The house was eerily quiet. The first thing I noticed was that Mark's keys weren't on the hook by the door. That hook had always been his one consistent ritual. He'd come home, hang up his keys, and say, "Made it through another one." But not today. The second thing I noticed was a note, a single piece of paper, folded neatly and tucked under the remote. I picked it up, already dreading what it might say. It was from Mark. "Claire, I'll pick up the rest of my things when I figure out where I'm going. Please don't call me. I need space. You've made your feelings clear. Mark." The word stung more than I expected. It felt like being slapped twice, once for the note itself, and again for realizing that he had actually left. I thought about calling him, but then my pride kicked in. He was overreacting, I told myself. It was just jokes. People tease their spouses all the time, right? That's what I kept telling myself as I put on a pot of coffee and stared out the window, trying to convince myself that I wasn't the villain in this story. But the truth kept gnawing at me. I could still see his face, hear the way his voice cracked when he said, 15 years. I didn't know what hurt more, him walking out or that I hadn't seen it coming. By mid-morning, the text started again. Karen, ever the nosy neighbor, was first. "Hey, just checking in. That was something last night. Hope you're okay." Then Jennifer, another neighbor, chimed in. "Claire, I feel awful. Do you want to talk? Maybe grab lunch." Even Karen's husband, Dale, messaged. "Mark's a good guy. Hope you two work things out. Let me know if I can help." They all meant well, I suppose, but each message felt like a spotlight on my failure. It only got worse when Karen texted again, this time with a photo attached. Mark's absence hit me harder than I ever expected. It wasn't just his physical presence that I missed, but the painful realization that something was deeply wrong between us. I stared at the picture Karen had sent me, taken in a coffee shop. She had seen Mark sitting alone, calm and resigned, and thought I might want to talk to him. My first instinct was to scream, cry, or throw my phone across the room, but instead, I just stared at the image. Mark looked like someone who had already made up his mind about something. By lunchtime, I was pacing the living room, trying to make sense of how things had gotten so bad between us. Our relationship had never been perfect, but we loved each other, didn't we? We weren't the type to post anniversary messages on social media or call each other pet names in public, but we had something good, didn't we? I tried to think back to the last time we had a real conversation. Something meaningful, not just the mundane discussions about groceries or bills. But I couldn't remember. It had been months, maybe even longer. Somewhere between the routine of daily life and my habit of venting about him to my friends, I had stopped seeing Mark as someone who could break. And now, it seemed like I had finally reached his breaking point. I called Mark, but he didn't answer. I waited a while before texting him. "I'm sorry, can we please talk?" I waited again, but there was no reply. After an hour, I sent another message. "I'm not okay. I need to hear from you." Still no response. By 4 p.m., the coffee pot was empty and my nerves were on edge. I found myself Googling things like what to do when your husband leaves and how to fix a marriage after screwing up. I stumbled upon a forum for women going through separations. Most of the posts mirrored my own confusion and heartbreak, but one comment stood out. "You can't fix it if they don't want to be fixed, but you can show them you're willing to try." So I tried. The first thing I did was drive to the coffee shop where Karen had seen Mark. I didn't really have a plan. I just thought that maybe seeing him in person would help, that I could say something to make him come back. But when I got there, he was already gone. The barista said he had left about an hour ago and hadn't left any contact details. My next stop was to visit Mark's brother, Tom. Tom had always been a mediator in the family. If anyone could talk some sense into Mark, it was him. But when I arrived at Tom's house, he didn't know where Mark was either. "What the hell happened, Claire?" Tom asked, his arms crossed as he leaned against the doorframe. "It was a stupid fight," I said, my voice cracking. Not even a fight. Just teasing him like I always do. I didn't think it would hurt him. Tom didn't laugh. You're not everyone, Claire. You're his wife. That night, I sat in our bedroom, surrounded by reminders of him. The pillow on his side of the bed, his clothes in the closet, the half-empty bottle of his cologne on the dresser, the bottle of his cologne on the dresser. The house felt off balance, like it was holding its breath, waiting for him to come home. I kept thinking about the note he had left me. His words, "You've made your feelings clear," echoed in my mind like a bad song stuck on repeat. Had I really made him feel that way? I finally fell asleep, but I wasn't angry anymore, just scared. Deep down, I knew this wasn't something that could be fixed with an apology or a romantic gesture. I had broken something, and I didn't know how to repair it. The next morning, I realized I had to face the truth. Mark wasn't coming back unless I gave him a reason to. I couldn't just sit around hoping he would change his mind. So, I swallowed my pride and drove to his office, rehearsing what I would say the entire way there. But when I arrived, his assistant told me he hadn't been in all week. That's when it hit me. He wasn't just taking a break from me. He was stepping away from his whole life. A few days later, I received a letter from Mark. It wasn't a text or an email. It was an actual letter. The words crushed me. He wrote that he had been staying with a friend and thinking things through. He told me he kept going back to that night and realized it wasn't just about the jokes. It was a bigger realization. I had stopped seeing him as my partner a long time ago. He didn't know exactly when it had happened, but he knew it had. "I can't be the guy you laugh at to feel better about yourself," he wrote. "I deserve more than that. And honestly, so do you. I've decided to file for divorce. It's not an easy decision, but it feels like the right one. I hope we can handle this respectfully. Take care, Mark." The finality of his decision crushed me. My first instinct was to argue, beg, or fight, but deep down, I knew he was right. I had spent so much time nitpicking his flaws and venting about him to other people that I had forgotten what it meant to love someone fully, flaws and all. That night, I sat in the empty house and allowed myself to feel everything: regret, shame, sadness. I wanted to hate him for giving up on us, but I couldn't, because if I was being honest, I had given up first. The divorce was quick and quiet. We didn't have children or many assets to divide, so there wasn't much to fight over. Mark moved into a small apartment a few towns over, and I stayed in the house. Eventually, people in the neighborhood stopped bringing it up, and life moved on, as it always does. But sometimes, I would see Mark at the grocery store or driving by in his car. He always looked content. Not happy exactly, but peaceful. And it hurt to know that he had found peace without me. It's been a year now, and I'm still trying to figure things out. I've been in therapy, unpacking what went wrong and how I let myself become someone who took the person who loved me most for granted. The truth is, Mark leaving was a wake-up call I didn't know I needed. It made me question everything: how I see myself, how I treat the people I care about, and what I really want in a relationship. Do I miss him every day? Yes. But I also know he did the right thing. Because sometimes, the only way to save yourself is to walk away from someone who's already let you go.